Who looks outside, dreams. Who looks inside, awakens. Carl Jung. Imagine waking up one morning with that quiet, sinking feeling that something is off, that the life you've been living, the one that looks perfectly fine from the outside, somehow doesn't feel like yours. You go through the familiar motions, the same breakfast, the same commute, the same polite conversations, but beneath the surface, there's a dull ache, an unease you can't quite name. It's as if you're watching your own life from behind a pane of glass, performing a role written by someone else. Maybe it started years ago, so slowly that you didn't even notice. A parent's dream became your ambition. A teacher's approval became your compass. A friend's success became your definition of happiness. And before long, every decision, every yes, every no, began to orbit around invisible expectations that were never truly yours. We grow up believing that freedom means choice. But what if most of our choices are simply habits of conformity? From the moment we are born, the world begins to shape us, not through cruelty, but through structure. It gives us names, roles, and identities. It teaches us what is acceptable and what is not. It rewards obedience with love and punishes authenticity with rejection. So we adapt, we play the part. We learn to smile when we want to cry. We nod when we disagree. We say I'm fine when we are anything but fine. And little by little, we forget who we were before the world told us who to be. Carl Jung understood this quiet tragedy better than anyone. He saw how people drift through life, disconnected from their inner world, convinced that they know who they are, when in truth they are strangers to themselves. He wrote, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." But most people never claim that privilege. They live as reflections, mirrors of their parents, their culture, their social circle. They wear masks so convincing that even they start to believe in them. You can see it everywhere, in the endless race for validation, in the obsession with appearances, in the quiet despair behind curated perfection. People chasing titles they don't need, buying things they don't love, pleasing people they don't even respect. It's not that they're shallow, it's that they re-asleep, lulled into a dream of identity that feels real only because everyone else is dreaming it too. The greatest illusion of modern life is that we are all free. But most of us are only as free as the boundaries of our conditioning. We obey without realizing it, not through fear, but through comfort. The comfort of being accepted, the comfort of belonging, the comfort of not questioning too deeply. But comfort is a subtle kind of prison. It wraps around you softly, whispering, "Stay where you are. Don't risk losing this." And so, even when the soul begins to stir, even when you feel that faint pulse of rebellion inside, you silence it with distraction. You scroll, you work, you plan your next goal, hoping that maybe the next accomplishment will finally make you feel alive. But Jung would tell you that restlessness is not a flaw, it's a signal. It is your deeper self knocking, asking to be seen. Because the truth is, most people never begin to live. They only exist in the stories written for them. They stay busy building lives that look good on paper, while the quiet voice within, the one that whispers, "This isn't me," grows fainter with each passing year. Finding yourself is not about abandoning your life or rejecting the world. It's about peeling back the layers of who you were told to be until you finally meet who you are. It's about daring to ask questions that most people avoid. What do I actually want? What am I pretending to enjoy? What have I sacrificed just to belong? These questions are dangerous, not because they destroy, but because they reveal. They tear down the fragile walls of illusion you've spent a lifetime maintaining. They expose the truth that beneath the roles, the masks, and the noise, there is something real, something ancient, alive, and waiting to be remembered. And once you glimpse that truth, you can never go back. Because that's the moment life truly begins, when you stop living by the world's script and start writing your own. That's where Jung's journey begins, not with answers but with courage. The courage to say, "I don't know who I am yet, but I'm ready to find out." From the moment we take our first breath, the world begins to hand us costumes. Be polite, be strong, be smart. be successful. And without realizing it, we begin to collect masks, each one carefully designed to make us acceptable, likable, safe. As children, these masks are light. We wear them to please, to belong, to survive. But with time, they grow heavier. We forget they were ever masks at all. We begin to mistake them for our face. Carl Jung called this mask the persona, the image we present to the world, shaped by expectation and necessity. It's the version of ourselves that fits neatly into society's puzzle. The professional, the parent, the achiever, the friend who always has it together. The persona is not inherently bad. Without it, social life would collapse. We need it to function, to cooperate, to build trust. But the danger lies in identification, when the mask stops being a role and starts being our reality. Think about it. How much of your daily behavior is performance? How often do you act out of genuine impulse? And how often out of habit, saying what's polite instead of what's true? Smiling when you're weary, pretending confidence when you're crumbling inside. We live in a world that rewards the mask. The job interview demands composure, not honesty. The social feed demands smiles, not uncertainty. Even love, that supposed safe haven, can demand a version of us that is easier to love than the real thing. So we polish the persona. We curate our words, smooth our flaws, filter our lives into something coherent, digestible, enviable. And in doing so, we slowly bury the wild, contradictory human parts of ourselves, the parts that laugh too loud, cry too icily, doubt too much, feel too deeply. But here's the paradox Jung uncovered. The more perfect our mask becomes, the more hollow we feel behind it. Because no amount of performance can fill the silence of disconnection. When you wear the persona too long, it begins to wear you. He wrote that the persona is only a mask of the collective psyche, a compromise between the individual and society as to what a man should appear to be. Notice that word, appear. The persona is appearance. It is survival, not essence. And yet, for many, it becomes home. A home made of mirrors, where every reflection is flattering, but none are real. Think about the subtle exhaustion that follows constant pretense, the effort of keeping up, of managing impressions, of playing your part. That is the fatigue of living split, one half for the world, one half forgotten. Jung believed that the first step towards self-discovery is disobedience, not rebellion for its own sake, but the quiet defiance of being real. It is the willingness to let the mask slip, to admit that you don't always have it together, to allow yourself to be seen not as a role, but as a person. But here's why most people resist that step, because removing the mask is not liberation, at least not immediately. It's exposure. When the persona cracks, everything we've hidden beneath it comes rushing up. The fear of rejection, the shame of imperfection, the raw vulnerability of not knowing who we'll be without the mask. And yet, that's the moment Jung described as the beginning of individuation. The slow, courageous peeling away of false identities until the true self can breathe again. The persona is necessary, but it is not the self. It is the bridge, not the destination. And the tragedy of modern life is that too many people build their homes on that bridge and call it life. So the next time you feel that quiet hollowness, the kind that follows success, the kind that lingers even in laughter, listen closely. It might not be depression. It might be the deeper self whispering beneath the persona. This is not all of you, because beneath every mask there is a face, and beneath that face there is a soul, ancient, unedited, waiting to be remembered. And that is where we go next, into the part of ourselves that hides behind the mask, the part Jung called the shadow. Every light casts a shadow, and the brighter the light we try to project, the darker that shadow becomes. Carl Jung believed that within every person lives a hidden counterpart, the side we deny, suppress, and refuse to see. He called it the shadow. It is everything we reject about ourselves, the anger we repress, the jealousy we disguise, the desires we judge as wrong, the wounds we never tend to. But it is also everything we have yet to recognize as strength, the creativity, the passion, the courage buried beneath fear. The shadow is not evil, it is simply unseen. From childhood, we are taught what is acceptable. We learn that some emotions are rewarded: calmness, politeness, obedience, while others are punished or shamed. So we split ourselves in two. We present the good self to the world and banish the rest into the dark corners of the mind. You can see this process everywhere. The person who prides themselves on kindness but secretly resents everyone who takes advantage of them. The perfectionist who hides deep self-loathing behind the mask of achievement. The moral crusader who condemns others for the very impulses they suppress within themselves. The more we push these parts away, the stronger they become. Because what you resist doesn't disappear, it waits. It hides beneath your reactions, slips into your dreams, and leaks through your words in moments of anger, fear, or shame. The shadow does not die in the dark. It grows there. Have you ever found yourself hating someone without really knowing why? Or feeling an irrational surge of emotion over something small? Jung would say, look closer. These are mirrors, not enemies. We project our hidden qualities onto others, disowning what we cannot accept in ourselves. When we call someone arrogant, weak, selfish, or cold, we're often seeing a reflection of our own buried traits, distorted and unclaimed. It is a painful realization that the people we dislike most often carry the keys to our own unconscious. But it's also liberating, because every time we recognize a projection, we reclaim a piece of ourselves. Jung wrote, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. To face the shadow is to stop pretending you are only light. It is to sit with your contradictions, your pettiness, your envy, your rage, not to indulge them, but to understand them. Because beneath the chaos lies energy, raw, powerful, waiting to be integrated. The emotions we label as negative are not signs of failure. They are signals from the unconscious, urging us toward balance. Imagine the courage it takes to turn inward and ask, what am I avoiding? What am I ashamed of? What do I secretly envy in others? What part of me have I sentenced to silence? Most people never ask these questions, not because they lack intelligence, but because they fear what they might find. It is easier to keep the mask intact than to face the truth beneath it. But that truth, no matter how uncomfortable, is the only way forward. Jung compared the shadow to a wild animal trapped in a cage. Ignore it, and it grows restless, clawing, snarling, waiting for a chance to escape. Acknowledge it, and it becomes calm, not because it's tamed, but because it's finally seen. The shadow is not your enemy, it is your teacher. It carries the lessons that your persona was too proud to learn. It reminds you that you are human, complex, flawed, and alive. And when you finally look into that darkness without judgment, something miraculous happens. The fear begins to fade. The shame loosens its grip. And in that quiet space, you feel a strange warmth. The warmth of honesty. The kind that burns and heals at the same time. The moment you stop running from your shadow, it stops chasing you. It stands beside you instead, no longer a threat, but a companion. Because the truth is this: you cannot become whole by polishing the light. You become whole by embracing the dark. In the next part of this journey, we'll look at how this hidden side, the shadow, doesn't just live within us but constantly reveals itself through others. Through the people we love, the ones we despise, and the ones who inexplicably awaken something deep inside. It's time to face the mirror, the one that never lies. There's a strange truth about human nature. We understand ourselves best through others. Every person you meet, every reaction, every irritation, every spark of admiration is a reflection of something living inside you. That's the mirror of projection. Carl Jung saw projection not as a flaw, but as a function of the unconscious. The human mind, he said, cannot bear to see itself completely, so it casts pieces of itself onto the outer world, shaping how we perceive, judge, and connect. We see others not as they are, but as screens for our own inner stories. Think about someone who infuriates you. Maybe they're arrogant, lazy, self-centered, manipulative. But pause and ask yourself, why them? Why does that particular trait get under your skin when countless others don't? Jung would say it's because they are reflecting something within you, something you've exiled into the shadow. We despise in others what we cannot face in ourselves, and we idealize in others what we've forgotten we possess. The co-worker whose confidence annoys you, perhaps she mirrors the assertiveness you've learned to suppress. The friend whose laziness irritates you, perhaps he mirrors the part of you that longs to rest but feels guilty doing so. Even love, especially love, is projection. We fall for people who embody the qualities we've disowned or desire to awaken within us. The world, in Jung's view, is not a stage, it's a mirror hall. Every reflection shows you a piece of your inner world, distorted but truthful. It's an unsettling thought, isn't it? That every argument you've had, every grudge you've held, every moment of judgment might not be about them at all. It might be about you, but this is not an accusation. It's an invitation. Because when you realize projection for what it is, you reclaim power. Instead of saying they make me angry, you begin to ask, what is this anger trying to show me? Instead of resenting someone's arrogance, you might ask, where in my life am I afraid to stand tall? Every emotional trigger becomes a breadcrumb leading back to your unconscious. This is the work of consciousness, to pull those projections back home, not to eliminate them, but to see them clearly. But here's where most people stop, because it's far easier to judge others than to face ourselves. It's more comfortable to stay in blame than in self-inquiry. It's safer to keep the spotlight turned outward. We build entire societies around projection. Politics becomes the theater of collective shadow. Religion divides the righteous from the sinful. Social media thrives on outrage, each post a projection, each comment a mirror, and all the while, the deeper question goes unasked. What are we really seeing in them that we refuse to see in ourselves? Jung believed that the world outside us is an expression of the world within us. When we heal our projections, the outer world changes too, not magically, but perceptually. You stop seeing enemies where there are only mirrors. You stop dividing life into me versus them. You begin to understand that everything you encounter, love, conflict, admiration, resentment, is life's way of showing you to yourself. And slowly, something shifts. You become less reactive, more curious. You listen instead of attacking. You notice your triggers, trace them back, and dissolve them. You realize that judgment is not insight, it's avoidance. That every time you point a finger, you're pointing to a piece of yourself you've not yet accepted. And that realization is not humiliation, it's freedom. Because once you know the mirror is there, you can finally see. The people who used to irritate you become teachers. The conflicts that once consumed you become maps. Every reflection, every emotion becomes part of your integration. Jung wrote that everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. That's not just a quote, it's a practice. The next time someone provokes you, pause, feel the emotion without running from it. Ask, what is this showing me about me? That question alone can shift the entire landscape of your awareness. Because when you stop projecting, you start seeing, and when you start seeing, the walls between self and world begin to dissolve. The mirror doesn't lie, but it doesn't judge either. It simply shows, and when you're ready to look honestly, it becomes a doorway. Beyond that doorway lies the next stage of Jung's journey, the deep core of the unconscious itself. That mysterious voice beneath thought and emotion, the one that whispers when the world goes quiet. That S, where we go next, into the depths of the mind that dream even when we reawake. There comes a moment, often quiet, almost imperceptible, when something within you begins to stir. You feel it in the spaces between distractions, in the silence that follows noise, in the strange melancholy that appears even when everything in your life seems fine. That is the call of the unconscious. Carl Jung believed that every human being carries within them a vast inner world, a deep ocean beneath the surface of ordinary awareness. Most people never dive into it. They sail across it, busy with the surface currents of daily life, their goals, obligations, and identities, unaware of the power and mystery that lies below. But eventually, the tides shift, the masks no longer fit, the routines lose their comfort, and a quiet voice begins to whisper from the depths, "There is more." You can try to ignore it, and most people do. They drown it in noise, in schedules, in endless activity. They fill their days so completely that there's no room left for stillness. Because stillness is dangerous. Stillness reveals the echo of everything you've avoided. But the unconscious is patient. It doesn't demand attention. It waits. And when life finally slows, through crisis, loss, or sheer exhaustion, its voice grows louder. It speaks in dreams, symbols, synchronicities, through art, music, sudden emotion. It is that fleeting moment when a random image moves you to tears, or when a stranger's words feel like they were meant for you. It says the book that accidentally falls open to the exact page you needed to read. The song that seems to know your secret. The unconscious doesn't speak in logic, it speaks in language older than reason. Its words are feelings, metaphors, instincts. It is the storyteller behind the dream, the painter behind the image, the quiet guide beneath your rational mind. Jung saw this not as superstition, but as communication, the deeper self trying to reach the surface self. He said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." How much of your life has been guided by forces you don't understand? The patterns you repeat, the people you're drawn to, the fears that appear out of nowhere, the choices that feel both impulsive and inevitable. We call it coincidence, intuition, or instinct. But what if it's something greater? What if it's the part of you that remembers who you are, even when you forget? The unconscious holds everything you've ever experienced, every pain, every joy, every unspoken thought. It carries the instincts of your ancestors, the myths of humanity, the symbols that connect you to the whole. It is not chaos, it is order, hidden in mystery. And its call is an invitation not to escape reality, but to experience it more fully. To hear it, you must be willing to stop running, to sit in silence long enough for the noise of the world to fade. Because only in that silence does the deeper voice emerge. It will not flatter you, it will not comfort you. It will show you truths that the ego would rather avoid: your fears, your desires, your hidden potential. And if you're brave enough to listen, it will lead you toward wholeness. This is the beginning of individuation, the process Jung called the real adventure of the soul. It is not a straight path, it is a spiral, circling deeper and deeper into the mystery of who you are. Each dream, each emotion, each synchronicity is a message, a fragment of the map that leads back to the self. The world tells you to be productive, the unconscious tells you to be still. The world tells you to control, the unconscious tells you to surrender. And yet, it is through surrender that we find the greatest strength, the strength of awareness, of integration, of truth. So when life begins to feel strange, when symbols repeat, when emotions rise uninvited, when dreams start to blur into waking life, don't dismiss it as randomness. The deeper self is speaking. The ocean is calling you home. In the next part, we'll follow that call into the descent that Jung said every soul must face. The journey into the dark, where the shadow waits not to destroy you, but to complete you. Because before you can rise, you must be willing to fall into yourself. The comforting stories start to crumble, and what lies beneath them is not clarity, but darkness. Carl Jung called this the descent. It is not a fall from grace, it is a return to truth. The moment when the soul, weary of pretending, begins to descend into the underworld of its own being. You don't plan for it, it comes disguised as heartbreak, failure, loss, or a sudden emptiness that no achievement can fill. It arrives when the persona, that bright, polished mask, finally cracks under the weight of everything it tried to hold together. The descent begins quietly. A restlessness creeps in. The things that used to excite you no longer matter. The people who once defined you no longer understand you. You feel both lost and strangely awake, as if the world has lost its meaning. but something deeper has started to move beneath the surface. This is the dark night of the soul, the moment Jung described not as tragedy, but as initiation. He believed that before the light of the self can rise, the ego must die its little deaths, the death of certainty, the death of image, the death of control. It is terrifying, because we mistake collapse for failure. But in truth, it is transformation. Imagine a forest after fire, the trees reduced to ash, the air thick with smoke. It looks like devastation, but beneath the soil, the seeds are beginning to stir. The roots, freed from suffocation, start to breathe again. The destruction was not an ending, it was renewal in disguise. So it is with the soul. When the structures of your old self begin to fall, what you are witnessing is not the end of your life, but the clearing of ground for something more real to grow. Jung's own descent came in the years after his break with Freud, a period he described as being overwhelmed by the floodwaters of his unconscious. He faced visions, dreams, and symbols that defied reason. The Red Book is the record of that confrontation. He met figures of light and darkness, wrestled with madness and meaning, and emerged, not destroyed, but reborn. He understood that the descent is not a choice, it is a calling. The soul demands to be whole, and it will not rest until the truth beneath the surface is known. But here is the paradox. You cannot descend and remain the same. You cannot meet the shadow and expect to stay untouched. When you face your shadow, you meet every part of yourself that the ego swore to reject. The anger you denied, the sadness you minimized, the envy, the selfishness, the longing, the shame. And yet, as you stand before it, trembling, you begin to see, the shadow was never your enemy. It was your exile, the part of you that longed not for destruction, but for acceptance. To meet the shadow is to end the war within yourself. It is to realize that the monster you feared was guarding the door to your own strength. Because within that darkness lies energy, raw, creative, untamed. The same energy that fuels art, passion, courage, and transformation. You cannot transcend what you refuse to face, and you cannot heal what you will not touch. That is why Jung said, the gold is in the dark. The very things you hide, your wounds, your desires, your contradictions, are the raw material for your growth. When you stop fleeing them, you stop living in fragments. You begin to live as a whole. The descent is not the end of the story, it is the turning point. It strips away illusion until only truth remains. It teaches you humility, the kind that comes not from defeat, but from finally seeing the vastness of what you are. You are not light or dark, you are both, and the harmony between them, that is wholeness. As Jung wrote, no tree can grow to heaven unless its roots reach down to hell. The descent is the journey of the roots, the brave act of going down, not away, down into the unconscious, down into memory, fear, and forgotten strength. And when you emerge, and you will no longer be the same. You will be more human, more compassionate, more alive. Because once you have met your darkness and learned to hold it without fear, there is nothing in this world left to terrify you. In the next part, we will explore what lies beyond that descent. The archetypes waiting in the depths of the psyche. Ancient forces that shape our dreams, our choices, and our destiny. The universal patterns through which the unconscious speaks. The journey inward continues from shadow to symbol, from chaos to meaning. When you descend far enough into your own depths, you begin to notice something strange, a sense of familiarity in the unknown. Patterns appear in dreams, symbols repeat across time, faces you've never seen feel anciently known. It's as if, beneath your individual story, there are older stories, still breathing stories, that belong not just to you, but to everyone. Carl Jung called these patterns archetypes. They are not fantasies or metaphors. They are psychological blueprints, primordial images embedded in the collective unconscious, shared by all of humanity. Every culture, every religion, every myth draws from them. They shape the way we love, fear, fight, and grow. You can see them everywhere, in the stories of gods and heroes, in fairy tales and films, in your own dreams at night. The mother who nurtures and protects, the hero who ventures into danger, the wise old guide who appears just when hope is fading, the trickster who disrupts and transforms, the shadow who tests the hero's courage. They are not outside us, they are us. They live in the architecture of the psyche, rising and falling like tides as we move through life. Each of us is a stage where these timeless characters play their parts. Think of the hero. This is the part of you that seeks meaning, that refuses to settle, that hears the call to adventure even when it terrifies you. Every time you face fear, every time you take a risk or step beyond comfort, the hero awakens. But the hero cannot exist without the shadow. The shadow challenges, provokes, resists. It tests your resolve and forces you to confront what you'd rather ignore. Without it, there is no growth, no courage, no depth. And then there is the wise old man or woman, the voice of intuition, the dream figure, the whisper in your mind that seems to know the way when logic does not. You've met this figure before, in the teacher who changed your life, in the unexpected advice that came at the perfect moment, or in that inner sense that said, "Go this way." Jung believed that these archetypes are not symbols you invent, they are experiences that live through you. The myths of the world are mirrors of your own psychological evolution. The fall of Icarus, the quest of Odysseus, the transformation of the phoenix, these are not just stories, they are maps of the human soul. Every stage of your life activates a different archetype. The lover awakens when you begin to feel deeply, to connect, to desire. The warrior arises when you must protect what you value. The caregiver appears when you begin to nurture others. The seeker emerges when you can no longer ignore the longing for truth. And each one has its light and its shadow. The lover, in shadow, becomes obsession. The warrior becomes aggression. The caregiver becomes martyrdom. The seeker becomes restless and lost. Integration, Jung said, is not about choosing one over the other. It's about recognizing both. The archetypes are neither good nor evil. They are energies that must be balanced. When you repress an archetype, it does not vanish, it disroots. The denied warrior becomes the victim. The silenced lover turns cold. The ignored seeker becomes numb. But when you acknowledge these forces, they begin to work with you instead of against you. Jung believed that the goal of life is not perfection, but wholeness, to bring all these archetypal energies into conscious harmony. Because when you do, you stop being a puppet of your instincts and start becoming a conductor of them. You move through life not as a bundle of reactions, but as a symphony of awareness. You are not just one person. You are an entire myth unfolding. The hero, the sage, the fool, the rebel, all within you, waiting to be seen, honored, and integrated. And perhaps that's what Jung meant when he said, "Who looks outside dreams, who looks inside awakens." Because when you finally turn inward, you realize that every story ever told is a reflection of the same great story, the one unfolding inside you. But what happens when you begin to bring these forces together? When the shadow no longer hides, when the masks fall, when the inner opposites begin to meet? That is the next stage of the journey, the sacred act of integration, where you no longer reject parts of yourself, but allow them to coexist in harmony. Because only when you stop fighting yourself can you begin to live as a whole being. There comes a moment, after the descent and the confrontation, when something begins to shift. The fear that once held you captive softens. The walls you built to separate good from bad, light from dark, self from other begin to crumble. And for the first time, you start to see yourself not as pieces, but as a pattern. This is what Carl Jung called integration. It is not perfection. It is not peace without conflict. It is the quiet, radical act of saying, all of this is me. It means welcoming back the parts of yourself that you banished, the parts that felt too wild, too angry, too sensitive, too strange. It means understanding that every emotion, even the ones you fear, has a purpose. That the shadow doesn't need to be defeated, it needs to be understood. For most people, this idea sounds almost impossible. We are taught to fix ourselves, not to accept ourselves. We want clarity without chaos, light without shadow, strength without vulnerability. But Jung knew that this is an illusion. He wrote, "Wholeness is not achieved by cutting off a portion of one's being, but by integration of the contraries." Integration is not a single event. It is a lifelong dialogue. It is a conversation between your conscious self and the unconscious, between who you think you are and who you truly are. You can feel it happening in subtle ways. When you catch yourself reacting and, instead of judging, you pause to listen. When you forgive yourself for a mistake without needing to justify it. When you notice beauty and pain in the same moment and realize they were never opposites, they were always partners. In integration, you begin to live differently. You stop needing to prove yourself because you no longer live in opposition to your flaws. You stop dividing life into success and failure because both become teachers. You stop seeking approval because you realize that authenticity is its own form of love. You start to see the shadow as a guide, the persona as a tool, the unconscious as an ally. Each part has its place. Each carries wisdom, and something beautiful happens. Compassion, not just for others, but for yourself. Because once you have walked through your own darkness, you stop condemning others for theirs. You realize that everyone you meet is fighting an unseen battle between the selves they show and the selves they hide. You stop needing people to be perfect. You start seeing them as whole. This is not enlightenment. It is humanity fully lived. Integration also means learning to live with paradox, to hold joy and sorrow in the same hand, to feel fear but act with courage, to know that you are both the observer and the one being observed, the sculptor and the clay. It means accepting that you will never be finished, that self-discovery is not a destination but a rhythm, expansion and contraction, clarity and confusion, awakening and forgetting, and through it all, a slow deepening of self-understanding. You begin to recognize that every part of your psyche, the child, the critic, the dreamer, the cynic, is trying, in its own way, to protect you. When you listen to them instead of silencing them, you reclaim the energy that was once trapped in conflict. The mind stops being a battlefield and becomes a garden. Integration is not dramatic. It doesn't come with applause or revelation. It often looks like stillness, like a person sitting quietly, no longer running from their own reflection. But inside that stillness, a profound freedom is blooming. The freedom to live without pretending. The freedom to express without fear. The freedom to be complex, contradictory, human. When you reach this stage, the world itself begins to look different. You start to see patterns where you once saw chaos, meaning where you once saw coincidence. You begin to feel that life, all of it, even its pain, is an unfolding conversation between the self and something greater. This is the alchemy of integration, turning inner conflict into consciousness, and through that process, you discover that the wholeness you were searching for was never missing. It was only hidden beneath the noise of judgment, expectation, and fear. Integration does not make you perfect, it makes you real, and that is infinitely more powerful. But even this is not the end of the journey, because once you begin to live as a whole being, another illusion begins to fade, the illusion of the ego, that fragile mask that believes it stands alone. And when that illusion dissolves, you catch the first glimpse of something vast, the true self, the consciousness that transcends all opposites. That is where we go next. At the end of every true journey inward, there is not triumph, but stillness. Not a crown, not an answer, not enlightenment in the way people imagine it, but a quiet, profound peace, the kind that doesn't need to announce itself. Carl Jung called this wholeness the union of opposites, the reconciliation of all you have rejected, feared, or forgotten. It is not a state you reach once and for all. It is a way of being, an ongoing dialogue between the conscious and the unconscious, between the human and the divine within you. To live in wholeness is to stop fighting the flow of life. You no longer need to prove, perform, or perfect. You no longer split the world into success and failure, right and wrong, worthy and unworthy. You begin to see everything, even pain, even loss, as part of a greater unfolding. This is not detachment. It is intimacy with existence itself. When you are whole, you stop trying to escape life because you finally see that there was never anywhere else to go. You stop resisting what is, because you understand that resistance was only fear pretending to be control. And in that surrender, not of effort, but of illusion, you find freedom. Freedom from the constant noise of comparison. Freedom from the anxiety of becoming. Freedom from the tyranny of who you should be. You no longer move through life as a role. You move through it as awareness. This is the paradox Jung understood. The more you let go of control, the more in harmony you become with the rhythm of reality. The more you stop trying to be someone, the more authentically you are. When you stop defining yourself by fragments, your job, your story, your failures, your image, what remains is presence. That simple, luminous awareness that has always been here, watching every rise and fall, every gain and loss. It is the same awareness you felt as a child before the world told you who to be. The same awareness you glimpse in moments of beauty, or love, or deep silence when, for just a second, the walls of identity dissolve. Wholeness does not make you superhuman. It makes you fully human, capable of joy and grief, strength and tenderness, certainty and doubt. It is not about transcending life, but participating in it completely. When you are whole, even pain becomes sacred. You begin to understand that sorrow and growth share the same root, that every heartbreak was not punishment, but invitation, that every mistake was not failure, but initiation. You stop seeking meaning in grand explanations and start finding it in simple presence, in the warmth of sunlight on your face, in the laughter of someone you love, in the quiet realization that this right here is enough. Jung believed that this state of wholeness was not just psychological, it was spiritual, because when you embrace all that you are, you no longer stand apart from the world. You are the world, reflecting, learning, evolving through you. He wrote, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are, and that privilege, that freedom, begins the moment you stop running from yourself. To be whole is to live without armor, to walk through the world with open eyes and an open heart, to see beauty not because the world is perfect, but because it is real. You no longer seek light to escape the dark. You see that they were never separate. You no longer ask for certainty. You find peace in mystery. You no longer crave meaning. You become meaning. That is the quiet miracle of self-realization. You return to where you began, but this time you are awake. You realize that all the searching, all the struggle, all the shadow work and doubt were never leading you to something outside yourself. They were bringing you home. And in that homecoming, you understand what Jung meant when he said, "Only the paradox comes anywhere near to comprehending the fullness of life." You are light and dark. You are strength and fragility. You are the question and the answer, the seeker and the found. And when you finally accept that, when you can look at your reflection, flawed, human, radiant, and simply whisper, "This is me," you are free. Free to live, free to love, free to be, not perfect, but whole. At the end of every true journey inward, there is not triumph, but stillness. Not a crown, not an answer, not enlightenment in the way people imagine it, but a quiet, profound peace. The kind that doesn't need to announce itself. Carl Jung called this wholeness the union of opposites, the reconciliation of all you have rejected, feared, or forgotten. It is not a state you reach once and for all. It is a way of being, an ongoing dialogue between the conscious and the unconscious, between the human and the divine within you. To live in wholeness is to stop fighting the flow of life. You no longer need to prove, perform, or perfect. You no longer split the world into success and failure, right and wrong, worthy and unworthy. You begin to see everything, even pain, even loss, as part of a greater unfolding. This is not detachment. It is intimacy with existence itself. When you are whole, you stop trying to escape life, because you finally see that there was never anywhere else to go. You stop resisting what is, because you understand that resistance was only fear pretending to be control. And in that surrender, not of effort, but of illusion, you find freedom. Freedom from the constant noise of comparison. Freedom from the anxiety of becoming. freedom from the tyranny of who you should be. You no longer move through life as a role. You move through it as awareness. This is the paradox Jung understood. The more you let go of control, the more in harmony you become with the rhythm of reality. The more you stop trying to be someone, the more authentically you are. When you stop defining yourself by fragments, your job, your story, your failures, your image, what remains is presence. That simple, luminous awareness that has always been here, watching every rise and fall, every gain and loss. It is the same awareness you felt as a child before the world told you who to be. The same awareness you glimpse in moments of beauty, or love, or deep silence when, for just a second, the walls of identity dissolve. Wholeness does not make you superhuman. It makes you fully human, capable of joy and grief, strength and tenderness, certainty and doubt. It is not about transcending life, but participating in it completely. When you are whole, even pain becomes sacred. You begin to understand that sorrow and growth share the same root, that every heartbreak was not punishment, but invitation, that every mistake was not failure, but initiation. You stop seeking meaning in grand explanations and start finding it in simple presence, in the warmth of sunlight on your face, in the laughter of someone you love, in the quiet realization that this right here is enough. Jung believed that this state of wholeness was not just psychological, it was spiritual, because when you embrace all that you are, you no longer stand apart from the world. You are the world, reflecting, learning, evolving through you. He wrote, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are, and that privilege, that freedom, begins the moment you stop running from yourself. To be whole is to live without armor, to walk through the world with open eyes and an open heart, to see beauty not because the world is perfect, but because it is real. You no longer seek light to escape the dark. You see that they were never separate. You no longer ask for certainty. You find peace in mystery. You no longer crave meaning. You become meaning. That is the quiet miracle of self-realization. You return to where you began, but this time you are awake. You realize that all the searching, all the struggle, all the shadow work and doubt were never leading you to something outside yourself. They were bringing you home. And in that homecoming, you understand what Jung meant when he said, "Only the paradox comes anywhere near to comprehending the fullness of life." You are light and dark. You are strength and fragility. You are the question and the answer, the seeker and the found. And when you finally accept that, when you can look at your reflection, flawed, human, radiant, and simply whisper, "This is me," you are free. Free to live, free to love, free to be, not perfect, but whole.